Montana Territory, 1878. The merciless winter had finally released its grip on the land, giving way to a spring that promised renewal to everything except Winifred Sutton's shattered spirit. At 23, she had already weathered more hardship than most twice her age, and the scars, both visible and hidden, were her constant companions. Wind whistled through the gaps in the weathered cabin walls as Winifred stoked the fire, her honey-blonde hair falling in loose waves over her shoulders. The pale blue calico dress she wore had seen better days, much like its owner. 3 years ago, the smallpox epidemic that swept through the territory had claimed her family and left her face marred with several pockmarks along her left cheek and jaw. In the small settlement of Clearwater Creek, whispers followed her everywhere. "No point in getting your hopes up," her Aunt Margaret had told her last year before passing. "The frontier has too many pretty faces for men to choose the marked ones. Best learn to be content alone." Winifred had built her life around this truth, that her scarred face meant solitude was her only future. She convinced herself that independence was freedom, that needing no one was strength. The small parcel of land and the cabin her father had built were all she needed. Survival, not connection, became her singular purpose. Every morning, she recited her creed. "I need no one. I want no one. I am sufficient." But the tremor in her voice betrayed the lie. Lucas Everett had never intended to stay in Clearwater Creek. At 25, he had already ridden with cattle drives from Texas to Montana and worked ranches across 3 territories. His lean, muscular frame and sun-kissed skin spoke of endless days in the saddle, while his clear green eyes held a gentleness at odds with the harsh landscape that had shaped him. 3 months ago, a blizzard had forced him to seek shelter in town while driving a small herd to a ranch up north. When the snow finally cleared, he found himself accepting a position at the Rockingham Ranch just outside town. Something about this place pulled at him, though he couldn't explain why. Passing through is safer, he often told himself. The moment you plant roots is the moment you give life something to take from you. Lucas had watched his family's Texas ranch burn during the war when he was just a boy. Since then, attachment meant vulnerability, a luxury a man couldn't afford in the unforgiving West. The April morning that changed everything began with gunfire. Winifred was collecting eggs when the first shots echoed across her property. 3 men on horseback had surrounded her neighbor's wagon on the road that bordered her land. Mr. Peterson, a kindly widower who often brought her surplus from his vegetable garden, was being held at gunpoint. Without thinking, Winifred grabbed her father's rifle from above the door. Her hands trembled, but her aim was steady as she approached, keeping to the cover of trees. "That's far enough," she called out, raising the rifle. "Mr. Peterson is under my protection." The bandits turned, surprised at the feminine voice commanding such authority. "Well, look what we have here." The tallest one sneered, wheeling his horse toward her. "A little lady playing." The crack of her rifle split the air, sending dirt spraying inches from his horse's hooves. "The next one won't miss," she warned, her voice steady despite her racing heart. What she didn't see was the 4th man circling behind her until his shadow fell across her path. Before she could turn, another shot rang out, but not from her rifle. The bandit behind her tumbled from his saddle with a cry of pain, clutching his shoulder. Winifred whirled around to see a rider emerging from the tree line, revolver drawn and face set in grim determination. Lucas Everett had been tracking these men for 2 days. They'd stolen horses from the Rockingham, and he'd followed their trail alone when the foreman couldn't spare more men. The remaining bandits, recognizing they were outmatched, fled in a cloud of dust, leaving their wounded companion behind. In the silence that followed, Winifred found herself staring at the young cowboy who dismounted with fluid grace. His hat pushed back revealed wavy brown hair and eyes that assessed her with unexpected warmth. "Ma'am," he nodded, tipping his hat. "Lucas Everett, from the Rockingham. Seems we had the same idea about these troublemakers." "Winifred Sutton," she replied, suddenly conscious of her work-worn dress and the way she must look with wind-tousled hair and a rifle in her hands. She turned her scarred side away from him by instinct, a motion practiced over years. As they secured the wounded bandit and helped Mr. Peterson gather his scattered belongings, Lucas couldn't help but notice how the young woman moved with a wary efficiency, keeping her face angled away from him. "Been meaning to thank you for the water from your well when my cattle and I passed through last winter." Lucas said as they waited for the sheriff to arrive. I was half frozen. Don't know if you remember. Winifred stiffened. She remembered. She had left the water bucket and retreated inside before he could see her face. It was nothing, she said, busying herself with reloading her rifle to avoid his gaze. Saved my life, he insisted. Nothing about that is nothing. When the sheriff finally arrived to take the wounded man into custody, Lucas surprised her with a request. Would be obliged if I could call on you properly sometime, Miss Sutton. Perhaps Sunday after church services? The invitation hung in the air between them, unexpected as rain and drought. That would be inappropriate, she finally said, her voice tight. I live alone. People talk enough as it is. Then we'll sit on the porch in plain view of God and all of Clearwater Creek, he responded with a smile that reached his eyes. I just want to thank you properly. Before she could refuse again, he was mounting his horse, tipping his hat, and riding away with the sheriff. Winifred stood frozen, the rifle heavy in her hands, watching his silhouette disappear down the road. A dangerous warmth unfurled in her chest. Hope, the most treacherous emotion of all. True to his word, Lucas appeared at her gate the following Sunday, dressed in a clean shirt with his hair slicked back with water. He carried a small package wrapped in brown paper. Brought something for your trouble, he said, extending the package as she reluctantly invited him to sit on the porch steps. Inside was a small box of ammunition that matched her rifle perfectly. Noticed you were running low, he explained. Figured it might be useful out here alone. I managed just fine, she replied stiffly, though she accepted the gift. Never said you didn't. They sat in awkward silence until Lucas began speaking of his travels. Cattle drives under star-filled skies, the endless horizon of the plains, mountains that touched heaven. Despite herself, Winifred found herself drawn into his stories. For the first time in years, she forgot to angle her face away, forgot to guard her expressions. When she realized her mistake, she abruptly turned, standing to end the visit. Thank you for the ammunition, Mr. Everett, but I have chores waiting. Lucas stood, his expression unreadable. Of course. Perhaps I could call again. Your fence line could use some mending before summer storms. I can mend my own fences. Never doubted it. But 4 hands work faster than 2. Before she could form a proper refusal, he was gone, leaving Winifred with the unsettling feeling that her carefully constructed isolation had just developed its first crack. Over the following weeks, Lucas appeared regularly at her property. He brought fence posts one day, helped clear a fallen tree the next. Each time, Winifred maintained her distance, yet found herself watching the fluid way he moved, the careful attention he gave to each task, the respect with which he treated her land. Why are you doing this? She finally demanded one afternoon as he repaired her chicken coop without being asked. Lucas paused, hammer in mid-swing. Because neighbors help neighbors. We're not neighbors. Your ranch is 5 miles away. Close enough out here. He resumed his work, then added quietly, and maybe I like the company. You don't even know me, she countered. I know you stood up to armed men to protect old Peterson. I know you keep this place running alone when most couldn't. I know you make the best biscuits in the territory. Winifred felt heat rise to her face. You're wasting your time. My time to waste. He replied with that easy smile that both irritated and intrigued her. As spring melted into summer, Winifred found herself looking for his approach each day. When a week passed without sign of him, disappointment sat heavy in her chest, though she wouldn't admit it, even to herself. When he finally reappeared, he was leading a beautiful chestnut mare. Brought you something, he called from the gate. Winifred approached cautiously. I can't accept a horse. Not asking you to. Rockingham borrowed her for breeding. Owner never claimed her full, so the boss said I could have her. Problem is, I'm heading up to the north pasture for the next month. Thought maybe you could look after her until I return. The mare nuzzled Winifred's shoulder, and she found herself stroking the animal's velvet nose. She needs someone to ride her regularly, Lucas continued. Would be doing me a favor. They both knew it was a transparent excuse, but Winifred found herself nodding. Just until you return. The month Lucas was gone stretched endlessly. Riding the mare, Penny, she'd named her, became the highlight of Winifred's days. She explored boundaries of her property she hadn't visited in years, feeling something like freedom in those moments. When thunderclouds gathered one afternoon, Winifred was miles from home. The storm broke with fury, sending Penny into a panic. The mare reared, throwing Winifred before bolting. Pain shot through her ankle as she tried to stand. Lightning illuminated the landscape in harsh relief as Winifred dragged herself to the shelter of a rocky outcropping, knowing no one would miss her until it was too late. Hours passed as the storm raged. Consciousness began to slip away when hoofbeats penetrated the sound of rain. Through blurred vision, she saw a rider approaching, silhouetted against lightning. Winifred! Lucas's voice cut through the storm as he dismounted, gathering her into his arms. I've been searching everywhere. Penny came back without me, she managed through chattering teeth. Showed up at the ranch wild-eyed. Knew something was wrong. He wrapped his coat around her shivering form. Can you ride? When she shook her head, he lifted her onto his horse, mounting behind her and holding her securely against his chest. I've got you, he murmured against her hair as they rode through the rain. You're safe now. At her cabin, Lucas tended her injured ankle with gentle hands, built up the fire, and prepared a simple meal from her stores. When fever set in, he bathed her forehead with cool cloths, his eyes dark with concern. Through feverish haze, Winifred was acutely aware that he was seeing her fully now. Scars, vulnerability, all of it, with no shadows or angles to hide behind. You should go, she whispered when lucidity returned. I'll be fine. Not leaving you alone like this, he said firmly, offering her water. People will talk. Let them. As night deepened, Lucas settled into the chair beside her bed, his presence both comforting and terrifying in its intimacy. Why are you really here, Lucas? She asked into the firelit darkness. What do you want from me? His voice came soft but clear. To know you, Winifred Sutton. That's all. There's nothing to know. I disagree. He leaned forward, his face serious in the flickering light. I've watched you fight to keep this place, face down bandits, work from sunrise to sunset. You're the strongest person I've ever met. She turned away, emotion threatening to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. You don't see what everyone else sees. And what's that? The word she'd held inside for years finally broke free. A scarred woman no one will ever want. Damaged goods. Someone to pity, but never to. Her voice broke. Lucas moved to sit on the edge of the bed, gently turning her face toward him with calloused fingertips, his touch feather-light against her scars. Is that what you believe? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. That these marks define your worth? The tenderness in his eyes undid her completely. Tears she'd refused to shed for years spilled down her cheeks. It's what I know, she whispered. Lucas shook his head slowly. Then you know wrong, Winifred. These scars. They tell me you fought death and won. They tell me you're a survivor. Her recovery took weeks, during which Lucas divided his time between ranch work and her cabin. He arranged for the minister's wife to visit regularly as chaperone, silencing the worst of the town gossip. With each passing day, Winifred felt the walls she'd built beginning to crumble. Lucas brought books from town, read to her in the evenings, and shared stories of his childhood in Texas. He made her laugh for the first time in years. When she was well enough to walk again, he took her to a hidden meadow filled with wildflowers. Found this place when I was searching for you, he said as he helped her down from the wagon. Thought you might like it. They shared a simple picnic as summer clouds drifted overhead. Winifred found herself telling him about her family, about the epidemic that took them, about the loneliness that had been her only companion since. I convinced myself I preferred being alone, she admitted. That needing no one meant I couldn't be hurt again. Lucas nodded, understanding in his eyes. After my family's ranch burned, I swore I'd never stay in one place long enough to lose anything again. Kept moving for years. What changed? His gaze met hers directly. Met someone worth staying for. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibility. Then Lucas cleared his throat, standing to gather their things as though he'd said too much. The day Winifred learned Lucas's secret changed everything. She had gone to town for supplies when she overheard two men outside the mercantile. Everett's gotten mighty friendly with the Sutton woman, one remarked. Makes sense when you know why he came to Montana in the first place, the other replied. Man's running from something back east. Heard he got into trouble with some banker's daughter in St. Louis. Figured a disfigured spinster wouldn't have many options. Winifred froze, the packages in her arms suddenly unbearably heavy. Reckon he's just looking for her land. The first man continued. Connecting that parcel to Rockingham would control the whole creek. The ride home passed in a blur of pain. Every moment, every kindness Lucas had shown her recast in suspicious light. By the time she reached her cabin, anger had replaced hurt. When Lucas arrived the following day with a bundle of late summer flowers, Winifred met him with ice in her voice. "I think you should leave, Mr. Everett." Confusion crossed his features. "Winifred, what's happened?" "I know why you came to Montana," she said flatly. "I know about St. Louis." The color drained from his face. "Who told you?" "Does it matter? You've been lying since the day we met." Lucas set the flowers down carefully. "Not about anything that matters. You're after my land, aren't you? For the Rockingham?" "What? No." Genuine shock registered on his face. "Who told you such nonsense?" "Men in town. They seem to know more about you than I do." Lucas ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "St. Louis was 3 years ago. I was escorting the banker's daughter to a social function as a favor to her brother, my friend. Her fiancé found us talking alone and accused me of impropriety. It was his word against mine, and his family owned half the city. And you expect me to believe that? I expect you to know me well enough by now to judge for yourself," he countered, hurt evident in his voice. "Yes, I left rather than face a rigged trial. But I've never lied about who I am with you, Winifred. Not ever." She turned away, confusion warring with the desire to believe him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "The same reason you turn your face away when we talk." His voice softened. "Some scars we'd rather not explain until we're ready." The truth of his words struck her silent. "As for your land," he continued, "I've never once discussed it with anyone at Rockingham. That's not why I'm here." "Then why are you here, Lucas?" she demanded, finally facing him fully. "What do you want from me?" Something broke in his expression, restraint giving way to raw honesty. "Everything, Winifred. I want everything you're willing to give." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "I want mornings and evenings, and all the moments between. I want your smile and your strength, and even your stubbornness. I want to build something that lasts." The intensity of his words staggered her. "You can't mean that." "I've never meant anything more. No man will ever want me," she confessed, the words torn from someplace deep and wounded. "Not like this. Not for life." Lucas closed the distance between them, his hands gently framing her face, thumbs tracing the scars she'd hidden for so long. "I already do," he replied, his voice steady with certainty. When his lips met hers, Winifred felt the last of her walls crumble into dust. Their newfound happiness lasted exactly 17 days. On the 18th day, a stranger rode into Clearwater Creek asking questions about Lucas Everett. The man wore a deputy's badge from Missouri and carried wanted posters bearing Lucas's likeness. Word reached the ranch before it reached Winifred. By the time Lucas rode to her cabin, his expression was grim with resignation. "They've come for me," he said simply as she met him at the door. Fear clutched at her heart. "Who?" "Deputy from St. Louis." The banker's family never let it go. He dismounted slowly, as though carrying an invisible weight. "I need to leave tonight." "You're running again?" Lucas shook his head. "Not this time. I'm going back to face it. The charges are false, but running made me look guilty. I need to clear my name if I'm ever going to have a life worth offering you." "Let me come with you," she pleaded. "I can't ask that of you. The journey's dangerous, and there's no guarantee how it will end." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Winifred stepped closer, taking his hands in hers. "You faced my scars without flinching. Let me face yours." Lucas's eyes darkened with emotion. "This is different, Winifred. I could be imprisoned. I could hang. Then I'll fight for you, the way you fought for me." That night, they made desperate plans by lamplight. They would leave before dawn, taking the mountain trail to avoid the main roads. Lucas knew people in Wyoming who could help them reach St. Louis safely. As first light touched the eastern sky, they prepared to depart. Winifred had packed only essentials, leaving her father's cabin locked tight against her uncertain return. The sound of approaching horses shattered the dawn silence. "It's too late," Lucas whispered, pushing her toward the barn. "Hide. I'll draw them away." "No," she hissed, clutching his arm. "We face this together." The deputy from St. Louis dismounted in her yard, flanked by the local sheriff and 2 men Winifred recognized as ranch hands from the Rockingham. "Lucas Everett," the deputy called, hand resting on his sidearm. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of attempted seduction and flight from justice. Lucas stepped forward, shoulders squared. I'm innocent of those charges, Deputy. That's for a court to decide. Winifred moved to stand beside him, her voice carrying across the yard. You'll have to take me too. The deputy eyed her dismissively. This doesn't concern you, ma'am. It concerns me entirely. Mr. Everett is my fiancé. Lucas looked at her sharply, but she continued without hesitation. I have witnesses to his character and whereabouts for the past 6 months. I'll be accompanying him to St. Louis to ensure he receives a fair hearing. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Miss Sutton is a respected property owner hereabouts, Deputy. If she vouches for Everett. A warrant is a warrant, the deputy insisted, though with less certainty. Then I suggest you telegraph the judge in St. Louis and inform him that additional witnesses will be appearing, Winifred replied with steel in her voice, and that any attempt to separate me from Mr. Everett will result in formal complaints to the territorial governor. The journey to St. Louis took 3 grueling weeks. Though the deputy allowed Winifred to accompany them, Lucas remained in custody, wrists bound during the day and ankles shackled each night. You shouldn't have come, he told her during a rare moment of privacy at a roadside camp. This isn't your fight. Winifred's eyes flashed in the firelight. You made it mine the day you stayed by my sickbed, the day you saw beyond my scars. In St. Louis, Lucas was imprisoned while awaiting trial. Winifred took a room at a modest boarding house, using her dwindling savings to hire a lawyer and track down Lucas's friend, the banker's son who had asked Lucas to escort his sister. I've been trying to clear his name for years, James Harrington told her when she finally located him. My sister confessed the truth months ago, but her fiancé's family suppressed her statement. Will she testify now? She's married to another man in Boston. But I have her sworn affidavit, and I'll testify myself. The trial lasted 3 days. Winifred sat straight-backed in the courtroom as Lucas's accusers painted him as a predatory cowhand who had taken advantage of a young woman's trust. When her turn came to testify, Winifred approached the stand with her head high, making no attempt to hide her scarred face from the judge or jury. How do you know the defendant? The prosecutor asked. He saved my life, she replied simply. When illness took my family and left me scarred, I believed no one would ever see beyond these marks. Lucas Everett did. He showed me that true worth lies deeper than skin. And you expect us to believe your relationship is based on such noble sentiments? The prosecutor's tone dripped with skepticism. Winifred met his gaze without flinching. I expect you to recognize truth when you hear it, sir. Lucas Everett is a man of honor who chose to return and face false accusations rather than live in hiding. That alone should tell you his character. When James Harrington presented his sister's affidavit confirming Lucas's innocence, the case began to crumble. By the 3rd day, the banker's son-in-law, the true architect of the false charges, was facing questions about perjury. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning with their verdict, not guilty on all charges. Lucas was released into the bright September sunshine, the chains that had bound him for weeks finally removed. When he saw Winifred waiting on the courthouse steps, he crossed the distance between them in long strides, gathering her into an embrace that lifted her feet from the ground. You did the impossible, he murmured against her hair. I did what you taught me, she replied. I fought for what mattered. Their return journey to Montana was marked by a lightness neither had felt before. At night, they planned their future beside campfires under vast starry skies. I can't offer you much, Lucas said as they crossed the Wyoming border. My savings are gone after all this. I don't need much, Winifred answered, her hand finding his. Just you. I was thinking, he continued hesitantly. If we combine my experience with cattle and your land along the creek, we might build something worth passing on someday. She smiled, understanding his meaning. Children would need a proper name to inherit such a legacy. They would indeed. Lucas drew a small wooden box from his pocket. I carved this while waiting for the trial. It's not fancy like store-bought, but inside lay a ring fashioned from polished antler, intricate patterns etched into its surface. Winifred Sutton, will you make me the happiest man in the territories? Her answer was in her kiss, witnessed only by the endless prairie sky. They married in Clearwater Creek's small church the week after their return. The entire settlement turned out, curious to see the culmination of what had become the territory's most talked-about romance. As winter settled over the land, Winifred and Lucas worked side by side to prepare for spring. They expanded the cabin, added a proper barn, and purchased a small herd of cattle with Lucas's restored savings. The Rocking M's owner, impressed by Lucas's determination to clear his name, offered partnership in future drives. Christmas Eve found them by the fire in their expanded home, planning for the seasons to come. "I have something for you," Winifred said, placing a small package in Lucas's hands. Inside was a hand-stitched baby's blanket. Lucas looked up, wonder dawning in his eyes. "Are you certain?" Her smile was radiant as she nodded. "Come June, there'll be 3 of us." He gathered her close, his hand gently resting over the secret they now shared. "When I first rode into Clearwater Creek," Lucas whispered, "I believed the worst pain was in staying put, in risking roots that could be torn away. I was so wrong, Winifred. The worst pain was in never belonging anywhere at all." "And now?" she asked, her fingers tracing the lines of his face. "Now I know home isn't a place." His hand caressed her scarred cheek with reverence. "It's wherever we face the world together." Outside, snow blanketed the Montana landscape, transforming the harsh frontier into something soft and gleaming with possibility. Inside, Winifred and Lucas Everett had created something the wilderness could never take away, a love strong enough to weather any storm the frontier might bring.